Hey again. So I decided to post a second quick video on this topic of Tylenol. It and the ridiculousness of it. And the reason I made a separate video is because I think this one's going to get blocked because I'm going to be talking about the unspeakable. Tylenol certainly does not cause autism in children to the extent that it is in our country. Not every pregnant woman is taking it. The whole idea is to just blame women. But one of the things that they are not talking about is what really causes autism, and why we've had a spike in autism since the 40s is from nuclear contamination. On my YouTube channel, Beyond Extinction Love, if you look in my history, you'll see that I read a book called Population Control Through Nuclear Contamination, written by Dr. John Goffman and Dr. Arthur Tamplin. They were hired by the U.S. government to figure out a good use for nuclear waste in the 60s. They studied it for several years. I think it was 8, but I could be wrong on that, but for quite a long time. And they could not find a good use. They were literally chased out of the Department of Energy because they did not give them the answers they wanted. They refused to back down from their findings that exposure to ongoing low-level nuclear contamination causes autism, diabetes, schizophrenia, autoimmune diseases, and cancer. We know that, but there's one other common disease that we've seen a spike in. And they're all caused by nuclear contamination, exposure to low-level nuclear contamination, which is literally what happens in the United States at every nuclear power plant for at least 2 weeks. Because unlike in Europe, when our nuclear power plants shut down to clean everything and replace things, their annual necessary upkeep, they have to open the vents. And in Europe, they send out flyers a week before this happens and tells everybody to stay inside, carry an umbrella, wear a mask, don't bring your clothes into your house, to show some caution because you're being exposed to nuclear contamination. And they warn people. In America, the Atomic Energy Agency decided to just aggregate the exposure through the whole year. So we've only got 2 weeks of exposure, and if you aggregate it for the whole rest of the year, it's not that high. Except for 2 weeks, it's super high at every single nuclear power facility. When I had my radio show, The Age of Fission, about 10 years ago, in one of my videos, and you can look it up on my YouTube channel, I did a basic experiment where I looked up on the CDC website where are the nuclear power facilities, and then I looked at where all the diseases were for children, childhood diseases, and they have them in little circles. I overlaid the two maps, and there is a direct correlation between living near a nuclear power facility and having childhood diseases, including autism. Autism is extremely common since the 40s, because America was the only country that literally bombed its own nation. The Europeans, they bombed the people down in the Micronesians and basically wiped a lot of them out. But in our country, we bombed America, and Ruidoso in New Mexico, right down the street from El Paso, downwind. I mean, look at St. Louis. St. Louis had a nuclear processing plant that was completely not talked about at all for decades until, a dump site. A dump site caught on fire, and it turns out that they had purchased some nuclear waste and mixed it with some highly contaminated airplane fuel, and it just spewed out a fire. It caused a big problem for several years, and in fact their Congress people had to deal with it because it was becoming a public issue. But this whole business about Tylenol causing the spike in autism since the 40s, complete. The whole thing is about Donald Trump being mad at Johnson & Johnson. That's why he's talking about it. He's placating the wormhole brain while getting back political retribution. But the real demon in causing all these diseases in the United States is uncontrolled nuclear contamination. And if we did one thing that we could change is go to how the model in Europe does this on their nuclear contamination, nuclear exposure from their nuclear power plants. If we just warned our citizens every year at every nuclear facility that they were about to be exposed, kept them inside, had them take some simple precautions, we could manage the nuclear contamination. It wouldn't cause this spike in diseases. But somewhere in America, they decided they are just going to ignore every threat that nuclear contamination causes, come out with a phrase that says no immediate harm to human health. For God's sakes, even the guys who went to Fukushima and were exposed directly were denied health benefits and benefits from our government. They lost every single case. People who are fighting to fight nuclear contamination and the aftermath that it has wrung in their lives generally lose in the United States. Now, that is something that we need to talk about because that goes across political aisles. But Americans need to actually start paying attention. If you live near a nuclear power plant, find out when they do their annual cleaning, and you can at least take the precautions yourself. Because there is no need to expose yourself and your children when you could very simply take some guidelines, pretend like you've just had a nuclear meltdown for 2 weeks. Because it is. They're basically just spewing nuclear waste into the air for, I think it's 48 hours. And it lingers for 2 weeks. So I don't know if this video is going to get dinged by TikTok, which I have heard is now a mouthpiece for the Republican Party and Donald Trump, and I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, as far as I knew, this venue was owned by the Chinese, and they were horrible. So, like, whatever. If they're going to ban me, I don't think me talking about nuclear contamination is a partisan thing here. I think it pretty much it goes across the board. You mentioned nuclear contamination, you know. My radio show, The Age of Fission, got 18,000 viewers after like 4 years on the air. So anyways, you guys, please take some precautions if you live near a nuclear power facility because you're being poisoned. And that is, in fact, what causes autism in our country. That is my view from what I was able to. I mean, I'm no scientist, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. Spikes in diseases around nuclear power facilities. And that's the other interesting thing. They've never studied it. They just stopped studying it. It's kind of like Cittadini in the DOJ refusing to talk to the victims of Epstein. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't talk to them, you don't know what's going on. Same thing. If we don't study the effects of nuclear contamination on our country, then we don't have to fix it. We just let everybody think, gee whiz, I wonder why there's a spike. It's the food. It's the Tylenol. It's the water. Yes, and actually it is in the water because guess what? Our water is got full of nuclear contamination. Tritium is in our water at an uncontrollable amount. So are nitrates, by the way. But we're not even talking about nuclear contamination anymore. That's not even on the table. I can't really discuss this because if I do, my channel gets blocked. What do they call that? When they don't promote your channel, I forget what it's called. Anyways, that's what happens when you're a boomer. So put your courage feet on, you guys, because we definitely need it. If you live near a nuclear power plant, please, please, please protect your family. Find out when they do the annual cleaning and take precautions for 2 full weeks, and that will help you. So put your courage feet on, you guys. Ciao.